deaf individuals were kept out of STEM fields for almost a century.
I'm so glad we grew out of that because it's like Duolingo, where it's like you're just teaching the word, but not like the concept behind it. When you're reading science literature, you need to understand the entire breadth of what you're reading instead of just reading the actual words, right?
It's very unfortunate because oralism caused sign language to not be used in higher education settings, in even K through 12. And so as a result of that, American Sign Language doesn't actually have signs for a lot of the key STEM vocabulary that kids need.
Hello, this is a Little Pursuits podcast where we have conversations with founders and anyone building something they believe in. I'm your host, Dar Patel, the founder and executive coach at Little Pursuits, where we help founders and leaders turn ideas into traction one small pursuit at a time. Today, we are joined by Mona, Jawad, and Ayesha Kazi. They're building a game-based platform that teaches STEM in ASL to K through 12 deaf and hard of hearing students and supports their teachers. We'll get into their origin story, how they designed for accessibility first, and what they're learning from building their company. Let's get into it.
Hey Mona, hi Ayesha. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey Dar, nice to be with you.
Thanks for having us on.
Yes, of course. So I wanted to start by talking about your earlier interest. So with this podcast, we always go back to the beginning. So when you were younger, what were some of the things you were interested in? Some of the things you like to study, learn, or just activities you like to be part of?
Growing up, I was a huge STEM nerd even then. I loved being able to learn about science and math in school, and I'd go home and I'd literally be reading through like encyclopedias just to see what kind of things are there. And I was also really into fantasy things at the time. So I'm a big Harry Potter fan for anyone else out there. And just being able to kind of engage in this world of discovery, whether it was through science and the school things that I was learning or through the different stories that I love to engage with. And so growing up, those two things were, around me all the time. My family and I really love to do those things together as well. And language learning as well was a big thing for me.
Yeah, I think I'm very similar. So I didn't learn English until I was like 4 or 5. So I was like really bad at like ELA. So I really like leaned into like being good at like math and science because just like that was the only thing I was good at because I didn't really know English for like the beginning early days of my life. And I think like even like going into like college, I think I really wanted to be like a theoretical mathematician. I think my dream was always to have like an algorithm or something like written like a theorem, when you like learn in class, like it's such a silly dream, but like I've always wanted like like Aisha's theorem. Like I don't know why, that's like something that I've dreamt of, maybe one day, but I know like I think that's something that I've loved. And yeah, like Mona, I mean, I loved playing games. I had an older brother who's only a year older than me, so like I grew up basically like a tomboy. So like I was always playing video games, and so yeah, I think it kind of adds up that we made a gamified STEM platform after our combined childhood.
No, thank you for sharing that. What was interesting to you about like science and math? Like, was there specific things that you were just like really excited to learn that really drove you to those subjects?
Yeah, I think for me, it started with the natural world and things like botany and plant sciences. My brother was super into this stuff at the time, and still is today. And we would go on these long walks in like our like local parks and things. And he used to carry these big books of different plants, and he would just stop and point out to me, this one's edible and this one's not edible, and this is what this one is. And I would just be soaking it all in because I love spending the time with him. And I also really love just being outside and seeing how connected we all were to those spaces. So that's what really sparked it for me. But I also just really enjoyed reading a lot. And when you're super into sci-fi and all that, you want to know how things work. You want to open up the back of your computer and clocks and things, much to sometimes your parents' dismay, but still. So I think that's really what got it going for me.
Yeah, I was I think the opposite. I like didn't like reading or like English for that matter. Like English and history class was just not my thing. Mainly because like there was never like with math it was so like black and white, or it's like if you're right, you're right. If you're wrong, you're wrong. And with English it was not like that. With reading comprehension, it was like so difficult for me to like wrap my brain around it. So I think that's why like I really liked like like science class, where it was just like it was is you can, there's like proof and evidence behind it, versus in English history it was like more like, oh, like, you can infer. Like I was not good at that. I really liked like evidence-based stuff, and like I think that's why I was like much more drawn to math and science.
No, thank you for sharing that. I think as people are listening who may be considering, testing out different things, it's good to see that at a very early point in your life, you can also try out different things, especially I think STEM, kind of subjects for girls and women who are like going into those areas. It's important to see that, it can start really early to just kind of get into that. So thank you for sharing that. And I know that you're creating, a gamified app for, deaf students. So was there any influence while you're growing up that contributed to starting a company for this specific group?
Yeah. So for me, my brother is hard of hearing. He has a genetic disorder called MPS2, which affects a lot of different parts of the body, but it also impacts hearing. And so he grew up with hearing aids, and I was also very interested in, that kind of technology and how that could impact people. And when I was in fourth grade, there was an interpreter in one of my classes who saw me kind of sitting on my own reading a book in the library. And she came over to me and she asked me if I wanted to learn some sign language. And I was over the moon because I had watched her interpreting it in classes, and I guess she had seen me staring at her intently from like the corner of the room. And so for that whole year during my recess period, I would sneak away from the playground, go over to the interpreter, and just learn all kinds of basic fun signs. I remember her sending me home with these different VCRs in like a little rice bag, and we still had like the VCR machine in my parents' like old TV at the time. So I would like take those and I'd put those in. I'd just be staring at the TV, just so amazed by how a language like this could break down barriers for people. I thought it was the coolest thing that people could sign underwater and that you could say all kinds of words without even opening your mouth. And so for that whole year, I was super into it. The interpreter ended up retiring that same year, so I didn't see sign language again for a very long time after that. But my interest in speech and hearing science remained pretty strong, driving me all the way towards the lab that I went into in undergrad and, of course, what we do today. But for me, it always goes back to, how much love, I think, is involved in being able to learn a language for somebody to keep them out of isolation.
Yeah, I'll take the other side of it. So I joined Mona basically to build games. So I was not involved in the deaf or hard of hearing community. I do have, cousins who are autistic in special education. So I've definitely like grown up with that, but not necessarily deaf and hard of hearing. And so this was all brand new to me, but Mona came to me with the idea of like, let's build some games to teach science. I'm like, that sounds so cool, because we like grew up with like cool math games. Like that was like our childhood. And it's actually funny because like the first games that we ever built out were like things that we grew up with that kids don't play anymore. So like we made a Tetris, and then we went into schools and they were like, we don't know what this is. And I was like feeling so aged out because I was like, how could you not know what Tetris is? Like this was our like, entire childhood. But like it really does show that we were like building these games like from our own childhood games, right? And so again, those were like very like proof of concept, like first MVP, just to try out things. But it really does go to show that like our team was just like building from our hearts and like what we really liked growing up. We had, what's that one? It's like Papa's Pizzeria or something. Like I know we've like played
Yeah.
so many games when we were younger. So a lot of like things that are built even today in the ASL Aspire like website are like very much so inspired by like those childhood games from like early 2000s, that taught us like key science, math. I don't know how much we actually learned from it. I mean, we really hope that we hit learning outcomes with our platform, but those are like still things I like think about to this day. Like when we're building it out, it's like those were so key to like our early childhood that like I hope that we can be the same for like the next generation of deaf students.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Before going into college or your next set of studies, how did you decide what you wanted to focus on, and what were you interested in when you were in college?
Yeah, so in high school, I was really, really interested in environmentalism, kind of stemming from all the natural world stuff that I talked about earlier. And so that led me to go ahead and start a series of little projects at my high school where we did like a little school garden. I started interning with some landscape architects, realized I did not have an artistic bone in my body and that engineering might be a way for me instead. And that was an idea that actually came from my dad because he's a civil engineer. Both of my parents are immigrants from Iraq. They came over here, and education has been important to all of us. But yeah, so I remember my dad and I going to the engineering open house at U of I. And I think that was my moment when I realized that's what I wanted to apply for. I remember walking down into the basement of one of the big buildings there that has like all the microscopes and lab stuff, and seeing a electron microscopy image of like a little fly, and it had zoomed in all the way on one of the wings of this thing, and it was just incredible to see that like all displayed and something smaller than our eyes could ever see. And so I think engineering really appealed to me because it was this merging of application where you're going to actually make something tangible for the world, something that could improve things, and also discovery where you could jump into research and find new things that nobody had ever looked at before, like the structure of this incredible little fly's wing. So I ended up applying for engineering undeclared at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign because while I had like 1,000 different interests, I knew engineering was the one that I kind of want to go with. I just needed a little bit more time to figure out what specifically within that I was most interested in.
A cool story like the fly. I don't have a cool story, unfortunately. I was like interested in science and math. My dad is a doctor, so I was like, I'm gonna follow the footsteps of my father. And then I got to college as an undeclared engineering. I kind of just like, as one does, like when they're confused, is just applied to like a bunch of schools, but all with like different majors. So like I applied physics for some schools, chemistry, biology, math, undeclared engineering for U of I. And then U of I was one of the best schools that I got into. So I was like, this is fate. And I'm really into like just believing in like trusting the process. So I was like, yep, this is it. I still did a lot of like discovery. Mona and I met through the undeclared engineering program. And so a lot of that, like, again, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I think I tried everything under the moon with bioengineering, mechanical engineering, electrical, computer engineering, and then finally going into computer science was more because I just really liked the applied math side of it. I think that was the most that and mechanical were like the two that I just like couldn't decide for the life of me, and I just was like, again, just like I put it in the hands of the decision or admissions committee at the end. I was like, you pick for me because I don't know what I want to do. But I'm really happy with it, with how I guess fate and everything turned out, because I really like just the way that I'm able to use like my math brain in an applied manner. And it did work out for the best. I did actually end up working for a company that was mechanical engineering, like CAD software. So like it did end up being like the intersection of the two, which was kind of funny. But yeah, I really liked just the idea of like being able to use it. I was really into like theoretical math, but it's a little tough to make money in this society in theoretical math. So that's why I didn't go that full theory based, just pure math. So that's why I went the route of computer science. I was double major in math as well.
Yeah, amazing. No, I think, that point where you don't fully know where you're going to go, or like, which area the focus should be. I think exploring and, kind of having this open mind of like, you know what, I'm going to trust the process and I'm going to land where, it's going to feel right for me. I think that's amazing because I think sometimes we have to feel like I have to decide everything when I'm 16, and it's like you don't have to. You can also just kind of know generally these are the things I like and then go explore it in those areas. So it seems like both of you kind of had that approach. So after you met, when did you first started talking about ASL Aspire?
So Aisha and I mostly bonded over a really horrific electrical engineering course that we both
We're
were
not
in during
electrical
COVID.
engineers anymore.
Neither of us became electrical engineers, clearly. So I think it was in the middle of one of those calls where we were working on some homework together. It was like absolute middle of lockdown, so we had started being friends probably a couple months before lockdown happened, and then everybody was off the grid. And it was something that I had just started as a small project for a class that I was in. I was just interested in interviewing deaf educators at the time, seeing like what was going on with their STEM curriculums and things. And Aisha was there, and she was a great listener and one of the most talented computer scientists I knew, even though she was a sophomore. And I just kind of threw the idea at her of what if we actually did something about this? What if we took all the things that these educators were telling me and made some kind of small project out of it? Uh, at the time, I was not at all expecting it to spiral into what it has today. I was pretty sure we were just going to slap together a week long project or something and submit it on the internet, and that would be the end. But there was a different path ahead of us.
Yeah, I also just joined because I had wanted to go into more research in my undergrad because, like I said, like I was really just like exploring everything. And so Mona had presented an opportunity to work on this research paper about gamified education. That was the one that we were working on at the beginning. And it seemed really cool because I was like, I can actually have, a project that I can like put on my resume. Like this is fun to build to. In the middle of lockdown, you have nothing more like your biggest asset at that point is time. And so it seemed like a really cool idea. She like came and presented it to like 9 of us, and so I was just excited to like be building something, doing something with my time. I mean, we were just like cooped up in our house, and so yeah, it felt like a great opportunity to try out research as well and see what that world is like because I was very, very, very new to it. That was not something that I ever dreamed of like wanting to pursue. So I was like, you know what, if the opportunity is right in front of me, I should try it out, especially it's with my friend, like it'll be fun. I remember telling Mona, I was like, I've never built an app in my life. I wish I was like one of those, coding out of the womb kind of kids, but unfortunately I was not. I was like, is that okay? Like I like never built something like this before. And she was like, yeah, like we have professors and people on our side, like they'll help us. And they really did, like truly, from every step of the way. But I think if we didn't have that like support, I was so stressed at the beginning. I was like, Mona, I've never coded like this in my life. I've only done like, like the homework, it like comes in like a package already, and it's like you just have to write like a couple lines of code. I was like, I've only done like that much. And she's like, it's okay, like we'll figure it out together. And like I feel like we still have that like mindset to this day where it's like we'll just figure it out. Like we have people on our side and our support system, and we'll get through it. So yeah, that's why we originally started and joined, was just I just wanted to see what would happen. Like it was cool idea.
Yeah, I mean, to give you an idea of how little, especially I knew about, coding and all that. When I was making the posts for volunteers, because I was going to send it to a bunch of group chats, I put the complete wrong coding languages in the requirements for like, I had no clue what the differences between the different languages were. So I remember one of the people who ended up being on our technical team at the time emailed me and he's like, are you sure this is the languages you mean? Because these don't seem to stack up. And I was like, yeah, it's fine. Whatever you know is good. So we've definitely learned a lot since then.
No, I love that approach of we will figure it out, right? Because I think when you're starting or if you haven't done something and it's your first time doing it, it can be very intimidating to just be like, well, I don't know it, so maybe I don't qualify for this role or position, and then you kind of take yourself out, right, of that opportunity. But I think we have to keep in mind that learning is part of the process too, especially if you're building a company, right? So as you guys were going through this research paper and starting to build this app, what were some of the initial things you were finding for your earliest like prototype as you're talking to deaf students and teachers and parents, all these different groups? What were you hearing that influenced what you were building?
Yeah, I think the thing we learned earliest was that the most obvious problem wasn't the deepest problem, if that makes sense. So, on the surface, educators, the biggest thing they told us was the vocabulary is what these kids are missing. American Sign Language is, as you know, I'm super passionate about it. It's a beautiful language. It's also a very young language in comparison to something like English or Chinese. And deaf individuals were kept out of STEM fields for almost a century. It's very unfortunate because oralism caused sign language to not be used in higher education settings, in even K through 12. So as a result of that, American Sign Language doesn't actually have signs for a lot of the key STEM vocabulary that kids need. So we often use the periodic table as an example. The vast majority of the elements on there don't have their own sign yet. I say yet because there is some really incredible deaf scientists and individuals out there who are creating this new vocabulary, and they're being trailblazers who can bring that language to everyone in the community. But that's going to take time. And that's also going to be reaching only the kind of higher education specialists first, while the kids in schools are going to take longer for it. So in the beginning, we thought, well, maybe our job is just to bridge that simple gap and just take those signs and give it to the kids. But there was so much more that these teachers needed, that they needed to be able to track how this vocabulary was with their kids. Vocabulary needs to be learned in context. You can't just present it on, a slide and say, okay, kids, this is how you learn it. It has to have some kind of physical association for a kid. And then there's all the crazy ways that language interacts with movement. So one of the things, the word run, for example, has so many different usages in English. You could have a river that's running. You can have a person that's running. You can have a company that's running well. But how do you convey all those different meanings to a kid in sign language? And, there's a million different nuances beyond that. But what we learned very early on was that the vocabulary had to be situated inside of contexts, and it had to be presented by the proper language models. We never tried signing it ourselves because that wasn't our place, that wasn't appropriate. But we learned very quickly that having deaf scientists on our team was an absolute must. Like there was no way that this mission could ever move forward with just, a small group of hearing students. No matter how passionate we were, no matter, how good our intentions were, there had to be that perspective and that lived experiences for this language to be properly taught.
It would always be ASL Aspire or STEP vocabulary app. Like we had kind of like that tagline following us for a little bit in our beginning journey. And so I'm so glad we grew out of that because you're right. Like we went into the schools and it was like, it's like Duolingo, where it's like you're just teaching the word, but not like the concept behind it. And it wasn't actually beneficial to their future. If we're talking about literacy is not just about knowing the words, right? It's about everything, the whole context behind it. When you're reading science literature, you need to understand the entire breadth of what you're reading instead of just reading the actual words, right? And I think another thing too that we learned as we grew was, like I said, we started as like a research project. We were young. I was like 17, 18 years old. We didn't know what we were doing. But scaling that from, even research funded to an actually commercialized product, I think that's something that we really had to learn of how to bring a concept or like even an MVP, right? How can we bring that and actually integrate it into the lives of somebody who we don't understand what that life is like? For example, a teacher of the deaf. I could never be in the shoes of a teacher of the deaf and tell you, what they go through day to day, how that curriculum actually looks like on, and what their directors are telling them to teach. There's just so many factors. Even if I wanted to know, I don't think I could ever know. And so that's why, again, like Mona said, like bringing on those people on the team to have those insights to help us integrate and commercialize it, instead of just being like, here, we made this, have fun. And it's like, no, it's like we need to, like, be very mindful of the way that we go about it. Even if, I mean, a big learning from our end was like, even if there are tangible outcomes, if you don't make it accessible to teachers, it's never going to make it in the schooling system, right? And this could be like the best curriculum, but it's, again, handing another textbook to somebody who is already like overbooked. Their plates are so stacked up so high. And so that's something that we had to learn, was like, there's kind of two sides to the story, and the problem statement is like, one, it's like what Mona was saying, where it was like there's inaccessibility to the language, but then another is like we need to bridge that gap to bring it into the schooling systems, because most of these kids are in schools, and if we don't make it easy on the teachers' lives, it's not going to be an ed tech tool that will be used, right? We could be amazing saleswomen and pitch our hearts away and get ourselves into that budget, but if they're not actually using it, our impact is not being made.
Right. No, I think absolutely with apps, right? It's only valuable if it's being used. And that's one of the metrics, we track, is to kind of say, okay, well, what's the usage? Is there retention? Are people coming back to this app every single day and getting some use out of it, right? So that's definitely a critical point. And I think sharing the perspective of both like the students that would be using it, but also teachers, right? And how they leverage it, and kind of finding that, middle point of like connection, right? So yeah, I think you guys had a lot of things going on for sure. And how did bringing on, your own team that has this experience of going through and going through the education system while they're deaf, right? And kind of saying, okay, here were the resources that were helpful for me. Here were things that were really like lacking. How did that influence what you built, and also your team culture, right? How did that kind of shift things?
It was absolutely essential, like in every form of the word. Like, I cannot stress enough how impossible it would be for us to do any of this without the deaf scientists on our team, the deaf engineers, and all of them who have so kindly and patiently contributed their perspectives and their times to what we do. Um, on a very practical level, hearing and deaf culture are two different things. And I am by no means a spokesperson for deaf culture, but I think there are differences that are very stark and become apparent when you start working between each other. There's miscommunications that happen in the beginning. There's, frictions that can come up in the beginning. And not as a result of either person or party trying to do something, malicious, but just misunderstandings. And so what that's required on, I think, both sides of the lake culture is for us to be open-minded and willing to learn from each other. So one of our wonderful scientists suggested that we started to do ASL classes for our entire team, because speaking with somebody and then having an interpreter sign your words is always going to be less effective and less connective than directly communicating with somebody in their own language. So we started doing that, and now, twice a month, our team participates in ASL practice and ASL classes. Aisha and I have both taken some dedicated ASL classes so that we can go a little bit faster with that. And that's been a game changer because, now if these scientists come to visit, they came over to St. Louis for a project a little while ago during our tornado season. We can just have conversations without, them having to rely on like a transcription app or, me having to rely on an interpreter. And so being able to bridge that language gap was important, but also to bridge the experience gap, because we're all coming with different lived experiences, not only from hearing and deaf culture, but Aisha and I come from different cultures. Many people on our team come from diverse backgrounds, and learning how to not just set those aside and be like, those differences don't exist, but rather celebrate those differences and, make sure that every time a holiday comes up, regardless of the culture, we're able to celebrate it as a team, to, make social media posts about that, to come together and make sure that we're not excluding anyone. I think is a really core value that I've always wanted to make a part of our team's culture.
I'll add one small thing too. So I lead recruitment for new hires, and one thing that I really do look at too is like, even though we are a SaaS platform, like we're building an ed tech game. On the surface level, it's like it's an app, right? And so for many companies, it's like you just want to find the most cracked engineer, and for us, I mean, we love that and being sensible, right? Being respectful is huge. We have a team of, half deaf, half hearing. And if you are not respectful, and you can be the brightest mind on the planet, but if you can't be respectful and understand how to work in that team, you will never make it more than an hour on our team, right? We don't want you on the team, rather, right? And I think that's like actually one of the hardest things that we've had to find, like something that we found out with building that team culture, was finding people who resonated with the mission on like an actual deeper level, even if we're hiring, whether that's hearing or deaf, right? And it goes on both sides. When we're hiring deaf people, it's like understanding that the hearing members are here to help and want the best for you, and then on the other end, for the hearing members, it's like you need to make sure everybody's feeling included and everybody's voices are being heard. And so it goes both ways in terms of the recruitment process. So we've struggled a lot where we'd have like the brightest people in interview for us. They're like acing coding interviews, and then we hit a behavioral and they just don't match in terms of the team fit and making sure that you're respectful to the people around you. So it's something that we hold as such a high value. Like at some points, honestly, it's higher than being the smartest person. I think for me and Mona, we take that as like more important sometimes, that like you can build skills and you can learn on the job. We're really, I mean, we learned on the job, so who are we to say that you need to have like X amount of years of experience? But we value actually just like being able to be at the baseline, good communicators, being respectful. It seems like so easy and like just be nice to everyone, but you come to find out it's actually pretty hard to find good people out there.
Yeah, and I think that's all absolutely true. It's also very much a process for us. Like, we by no means have perfected it. I rely very heavily on, my co-founders and on our leadership team to tell me when I'm making a mistake, because on this team, we want to know when something is going wrong or when something is not aligning with those values. So, when that comes up, I want to be able to navigate it together with people. So I think for any team that's trying to truly be diverse, to truly be able to bring all that together, it has to always be an ongoing process. And I think we're going to be learning this forever, but it's gotten so much better since the start.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Every company has to kind of figure out what that fit is, right? The cultural fit. And I think diversity is, of course, such a big topic. And right now it's a very divisive topic as well. But, working with so many different groups culturally, but also now you add another layer. I think, of course, it takes a little sensitivity, but also understanding and respect, like you guys mentioned. And I love the approach that you can learn the skills, right? That's something, if you don't fully come with that, you have an opportunity to learn it. But these other softer skills are very valuable and hard to learn on the job. You kind of come with those, right?
You can't learn how to be a good person.
Yeah. So sometimes that's I think as new founders, right, sometimes those are things to look for, as well as someone who is going to come and, collaborate together really well, and then they can learn as they go. Yeah. So as we kind of go into, you starting this business, how did you define your roles, right? And kind of like, who's going to kind of own the vision, who's going to go and execute things. I think sometimes that's a little hard, right? As you kind of become co-founders, and maybe sometimes you start to do everything together, and there's not clear, like, I'm owning this and you're owning that. So how did you guys have that conversation, and how did you decide what you're all gonna do?
Yeah, our story is kind of funny. So Mona came up with the idea. So we knew that Mona was going to take CEO role. It was kind of like a given. And then we had eight other initial people who were building this out. And like you said, everybody was doing everything. So then we took a meeting, and we all were in like a big room, and Mona asked who wants to take leadership of the technical side, and we raised hands, and only one person raised their hand for CTO. And then she asked who wants to do business operations, and we're all technical founders, so no one raised their hand. So then we said, okay, we'll table this for another day, and then who wants to lead the game design team, which so the technical side is like more of the actual like website and stuff, and then the game design is more the actual games and artists and stuff. And so we had our other co-founder Ethan raise his hand for that. And then I think at some point I guess like attending like these legal like seminars from our like university. So I was kind of just like already knee deep in like how to build a business. Like we were just like, I was just going to those things because one of our grants we got, they like made us go to these things, and I was the free person. So I was going to all these things, and Mona was like, like you've already been going to all of these like business operations things. Like what would you say, like how would you feel about running operations? And I was like, I don't know a singular thing about running a business. I have never even like, like my cousins, like back in the day, they'd be like selling like, like duct tape wallets. I feel like that was such a thing when we were younger, right? Or like little tiny, I didn't even have a lemonade stand, for God's sakes. Like I was not the entrepreneur growing up. And so I was really hesitant to say yes, because I was like, I don't know anything about this. I'm a technical, like I'm a computer science student, but I had already like taken a couple of those like seminars, and I was like, sure, like if you don't mind, like I learned it. Like we were in part of an accelerator program, so I was like, I mean, we'll learn it through the accelerator program, and we'll figure it out. So then that's how I became the CEO. I wish it was like super like like oh, we put our skills on like literally one was like, so who wants to do it, and like we're raising your hands in a room. But I do think like you have to step up to the leadership position, right? Like we don't ever, I mean, we've had positions where we asked people to become project managers, and because they didn't do it out of their, like they didn't want to, they kind of were asked it, and they were like, okay, sure. And then when they actually became the project manager, I was like, oh no, I don't think they were made to be a leader, and they didn't want to do it. So I think like I really, looking back, I'm like, it should be like people stepping up to a position and being like, I want to take this initiative and be able to lead this specific people to execute a task. And so I guess it worked out. I mean, I don't have any complaints about it. Do you have complaints?
I think we got extraordinarily lucky and blessed with the people who raised their hand that one day. I also had a more sophisticated story, but yeah, that is how leadership was initially picked. But I think with that, it's also a choice that we continue to make on a daily basis. We may have made that choice on day one, but people have stepped up on this team in many ways to other types of leadership positions. And defining our roles has been an ongoing conversation with everybody. Because with a startup, you cannot do just one thing, not with the limited people, resources, all that you have at your disposal. You have to be willing to step outside your comfort zone and, do what Aisha did, right? Like she jumped so beautifully into all the business stuff. I could not have imagined anyone doing it better. And not because, she had some extensive background, but because she was so ready to learn, always going to seminars, always asking questions, finding new mentors, finding new networking opportunities. And absolutely the same for our other co-founder, Ethan. He is a bioengineering major and really great at all that technical stuff. But we also discovered he has a talent for creativity, and he put that to work. He is just really masterful at knowing how to get a group of people and to bring out the absolute best ideas from them. And he's been doing that for all of our games and organizing that so far, and just kind of understanding how to direct our artists in a way that's going to bring this sense of joy and fascination and curiosity to the things that we build. So, like I said, those are things that, everybody kind of came in with, but the roles thing has been evolving and continues to evolve. And is something that I think takes a lot of clear communication and courage to be able to define.
Yeah. And I think just like one more thing to add, I think we all are at a point where we like can trust each other with the jobs that we are given. And I think that's a huge thing, right? So like even if, Ethan raised his hand for that, I was like, I trust him to know that he can lead the game design team to success, and I don't need to know what he's doing. I trust him with my whole heart, and he does the same for me, right? Like he doesn't even know half the things I'm going to here, and like going to an event here, networking with this person. It's like as long as like I think that's like the most essential thing is like the skills that or the responsibilities that you have as a leader, like we trust each other that we can make things happen. And if we can't, like, then I will say like, hey Mona, can you pick up this? Like, I can't do it this week. And so also like, being able to back down when you can't, when there's too much on your plate as a startup founder. It's sometimes like, it's hard because I know Mona has so much on her plate. And then I'm like, but I just can't do this week. And like, if someone else can do it, like that would really be greatly appreciated. So I think those are two things that I think moving forward has kept us afloat, like, and all of us sane too, right? We can't do everyone's jobs, but also like in a time of need, we know that we can trust each other to pick up like slack, if for lack of a better word.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because when I talk to founders, I think this is one of the critical points, right? How do you maintain the co-founder relationship? How do you build that trust and collaboration, and yet sometimes still disagree and have those discussions and come to some kind of resolution, right? And I think like talking to both of you, right, on a monthly basis, I see how well you work together, but maybe you can share, some of the things that you do behind the scenes to help you build that trust and maintain that relationship so that because you're building for 10, 15, 20 years, right? And that relationship will evolve over time, but you kind of have to have some things that help you to really build that trust in each other. Are there some things you guys have done that have helped you to do that?
Yeah, I think so. The interesting situation with our co-founders is we were friends before we were business partners, and especially with that continues to be the case a lot of the time where, she's my friend, but she's also the person I need to fill out tax forms with. She's someone who I love playing Nintendo Switch with, but she's also the person who I need to go nag about an email. And so that has always been, I think, something that has been an evolving part of our relationship because, there has to be open communication. Like you can't hold anything in or you're going to ruin both parts of that relationship. We've definitely had disagreements over the years, but it's about always believing that the person is, again, not coming in with the intention to do you wrong. Like being willing to sit down and listen to one another, rant about things, to listen to, each other when we've had a bad day in a different sense. So I guess in terms of strategies, it's just making sure that we just don't stonewall each other. Like that whatever happens, we're willing to talk it out, even if that takes a while, even if we're disagreeing on something, because it's really worth it. I think being able to have that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing too that I try to be very mindful of is like we are also best friends. So it's like so bad. Like we'll be talking about like our life, and then in between, I'm like, "Hey, by the way, did you fill out the W-9?" And then we'll go back and I try not to do that, but it's like inevitable because we're founders together. But I think also just like because we do have like a friendship outside of being founders, that also helps with like I think something that's really important is like as founders, especially like young founders, like we're going through school, we're going through full-time jobs, we're going through, I mean, life, right? Like all of the external things in our families and this and that. And so at the bare minimum, like me knowing like high level like what's happening in Mona's life also gives me an understanding and a little peek at like what she's going through like emotionally. So like if say Mona's not verbally telling me that it's been a hard week, it's like, okay, yeah, but I know that she told me XYZ was happening in her life. So I'm gonna give like obviously I give her benefit of the doubt, but like extra benefit of the doubt. Or like I'll tell her like, can you please take a day off? Like, because we're bad. We're really bad at taking days off as founders. I think that's like a very common problem. But yeah, I think that also helps me with like understanding like our relationship too. It's just like it makes it easier when like someone else is telling you to take a day off because we don't ever want to do it, right? Like we know how much is on our plate, how much is riding on the success, and it's like you can't get to that success if you don't take a day off. You need to like recoup, take the mental health day, and then get back to business. But I think just having like set times where we talk to each other about non-work things like gives me that perspective into her life as well.
I think that's an incredible tip for co-founders to do, right? Really get to know each other, know what's happening in each other's lives personally as well, so that you can kind of see where this person's coming from, and give them an opportunity to do what they need to do, and you kind of step in when you need to. This kind of give and take, so to speak. And also the comment on taking some time off. Yes,
I have to yell at each other.
Yeah, I think that's such a critical point for founders, where you just want to keep going, but that's a sure path to burnout, right? You have to kind of take a little bit of time here and there, but I think holding each other to that is also, I think, amazing, because it just comes back for you, right? You show up differently the next day after your day off, and Ayesha can go back to doing all the things she needs to do. So yeah, like it's super helpful to kind of have that person be on your side. So I see it with both of you.
And I think, both of us, or at least I'll speak for myself, but Aisha, I think you might have the same experiences. When we get stressed by externals, sometimes we try to throw ourselves into the work to like deal with that, because we're like, oh, maybe I can just make some progress in one part of my life, even if everything else is on fire. And often what that leads to is subpar work in both domains and burnout and all kinds of stress, but we don't realize it because we're just so tunnel focused on, I just need to do something right now. And so Aisha's been really great at catching me when I get into that kind of mode. I try to reciprocate as much as I can, because that's not a healthy way to go. When you're on fire somewhere, you need to go put that out, and you need to go take a minute, especially if it's something big happening with family or all that.
Yeah, no, and it's also good, like we are very mindful for us three to like, I'd say once or twice a year, just like regrouping and being like, what's our, 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year plan for our lives, not about our company, right? So, and that includes everything, right? That includes relationships, that includes, where we're living, what we like, obviously sustainability and keeping the lights on at home. Those are all important things, right? And so it's really good that we always have like at least twice a year a touch base of like, what does this look like? How many hours are we putting in? And where does ASL Aspire fit in our lives? And so that helps, I think, also just like, we definitely have employees where they just up and leave. And it's like, oh my God, you never want a co-founder to up and leave. I mean, that's like one of the scariest things is sometimes they're allowed to. Everybody it has, autonomy to get up and leave. And it's like really scary to think that like that could happen for us. So that's why we try to be mindful of those things of like making sure that we all have built enough trust within each other that say tomorrow if I want to get a full-time job, Mona knows, right? If I'm applying to grad school, Mona knows. Like we have that kind of communication set up so that in the future if something does happen, and every life always happens, right? And so just like keeping each other in our lives is, I think, really important, even if it's not sharing every little detail, right? Like, I know a lot of founders are not best friends with each other, and that's fine, but still, like, big things, right? Like, if you're working on a, startup full time, and then someone picks up a full-time job, you really can't do both full time. Like, realistically, you can't. And so being, yeah, open to talking about those things. It's hard. In the beginning, it was really hard for us to talk about it. We had a lot of like tough conversations where no one was speaking, and we were just really trying to put something on a document of like, where is our life going? Because we didn't know where our life was going to, right? Like, we're still seniors in undergrad. I didn't have a job lined up or whatever it may be, or I graduated early and Mona still had another year. So what happens in that year? And there's just so many factors you also can't control, right? So say you have like projections to be successful in X amount of years, like, we don't know if that's actually going to happen, and I still need to pay rent, so those are important things all that you need to talk about, and they're hard to, like, the beginning was really hard to start talking about it, but once we've gotten to a point where it's just like, I'll text Mona like, hey, I'm applying for this, just so you know. So you'll get there eventually.
Yeah, very important point. And I think, with something like a startup, your whole livelihood is kind of tied together, right? The success of the company is kind of also success to your like livelihood. So yeah, so it makes it even more critical to have these conversations regularly and openly if something's coming up. And so no one is blindsided, and actually you all can prepare together as like what's going to be the next step.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, you can't give like a 2 weeks notice for your co-founder,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's
Yeah.
not how it works. Like, there's so many things that need to, like, if you are leaving, like, to offboard, like, if someone just up and leaves, that's like
Yeah.
so much. I mean, let alone the emotional thing of someone just upping and leaving, but
Yeah.
it's not the same with like other jobs where you can just put in a notice and
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So just to shift topics a little bit, as you guys were building, right, or kind of at your starting point, what were some resources that helped you to kind of accelerate your growth, or even have some, additional funding for yourself so you had a little bit more runway? What were some things that were helping to kind of create that portion of it too?
Yeah, I'd say, like I said in the beginning, being part of the University of Illinois, like, more research side of things was really, really great to like initially build out our prototype, because we didn't know what we were doing, but we also didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. So having just that background of CS plus education, we had a lot of professors on our sides in the beginning, and I think it was really nice to like build with help, like teachers who we trusted, as like, instead of like, onboarding an advisor who takes an equity percentage, it was like, these are just like professors who like know databases well, so we just asked them for help about something. And so that was really, really helpful on the resource side of things. And then in terms of runway, that also got us into grants for research, that funded our first initial prototype. I know we just apply to a bunch of random things. I don't know if there's like a methodology to it, but just like, it was great to know that like all of us co-founders, for pitch competitions, there wasn't really, I think, like a methodology for it, but like any opportunity that came our way, like, we're very, like, all of us combined are very just like passionate about what we're doing, and I think that shows when we go to pitch. And everybody was willing to help, like, even though we begrudgingly will do a pitch competition, all every time I will complain about it because I don't really like going up on stage, but like, we know that it's for the success of the company, so everyone's always like up to go on the stage and talk about what we do.
Yeah. And I think it's a numbers game. A lot of it is a numbers game. I cannot quantify the number of grants and pitch competitions we have applied to for the last 5 years.
At
Uh,
least like 200.
yeah,
Yeah.
really hundreds, truly. And the amount that you're actually selected for is quite small in comparison, but those matter a lot for the amount of resources that you have. So yeah, like Aisha said, it's always kind of it's a roll of the dice. Judges are subjective, grant application reviewers are going to be subjective. But each one taught us new things. Whenever we did get accepted to one or we got feedback from one that rejected us, we could go back and use that to refine our applications out. And then, at a point, it comes to this situation where the grants have very common questions to each other. So if you have one running document where you have all your updated answers, suddenly the application isn't quite as difficult because you can just go and take answers from the last one and kind of port them over. So that really makes the process quite a bit faster. But those things do force you to think about the questions themselves, because they'll often ask you, like, who are your competitors? Tell us about your market. Tell us about why this is going to work. Tell us why your team is the one that's going to be the right ones to build this. And I think, being able to answer those questions for us meant that we had to think about them. We had to talk about them as co-founders. And not only did we end up getting the resources from the grants themselves, but we got the knowledge that came with it. And we were able to put that as part of those 1, 3, and 5 year plans that Ayesha talked about earlier.
Yeah, and a lot of those competitions also had their own internal network that really helped us like continue growing. So say it was an ed tech competition, they have, like an entire Slack channel of like, all the ed tech winners from past years, and it was like we could just reach out to somebody from there. And so I feel like it really was like a snowball where it's like everybody was helping each other out with those things. But yeah, I think the biggest thing also for getting the foot in the door is something that people don't realize is you don't need a fully functioning product to apply to these pitch competitions. I mean, to this day, I don't think I have a working demo on my deck. I have like pictures of aspirational, Figmas and designs that we want to have in the future. But it's like people are so stressed about having the entire product ready and then we'll apply. And it's like, no, like you need the funding to build that product. So a beautiful design can go a long way. Like we'll get there one day with the funding, obviously. And so that's, I think, a big thing that I've been also trying to tell a lot of people is you don't need everything, all the kinks worked out. You just apply as long as you got, like Mona said, like you got the problem statement down, your solution has. I think the biggest thing that we leverage though is customer discovery. That's very important, that we understand our customers better than anyone else does. And so I think that's, I mean, to this day we use that to our advantage, that no one else knows it like us do, right?
Yep. And that's because, we spent a long time doing customer discovery interviews, and we continue to do them. It's a forever going process because our customers' needs are forever going to be changing. But I mean, at the start of the podcast, I mentioned like this whole thing started because we had conversations with educators, and we continue to build by having those conversations, not just with teachers, but with the students, with the administrators, with everybody who's a part of the ecosystem that our product would land in the middle of. And yeah, like Aisha said, I think that is the number one thing that you can do to make a solution that's going to be really impactful. And to be able to express that dream to others, you have to be able to know what you're talking about first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is such a critical point. I sometimes hear of ideas. It's like I have this idea for an app, and it's like, well, have you talked to people who may want this app, right? And oftentimes I'll get the answer of like, no. And I'm always shocked because it's like, well, how do you know this is a good idea, right? How do you know people are going to want this if you don't talk to them? So you have to kind of identify who is that ideal customer you're going for and have conversations, have discovery, let them tell you what's the problem, what would they like to see, how could you solve it for them? Because they're in it, they're in the pain of it, right? So they can tell you a lot. And also the points you mentioned, numbers game, right? So this probably applies to a lot of things, right? Also landing your first customers. But, if you're going for like some kind of funding or grants, yeah, you just have to send out a lot of applications, and some will definitely stick, and you'll learn from each process, like you mentioned. So thanks so much for sharing that. Any other resources that have really helped you guys along the way as you're building and as you're thinking of the next steps in your company?
Yeah, I think just like a network of, I guess, like startup founders has been really helpful. Even, I mean, so we work in a very like niche space, right? And so, my ask is always going to be something that most people can't fulfill, right? Like, who really does know, a teacher of the deaf or a student in a deaf program? Like it's a hard, so that's not necessarily something that I'm looking for. But when I look for startup founder friends, I think that goes a very, very long way. Like, even just on like, so in terms of resources, like legal, if we got in anything legal, I can talk to my other startup friend who got sued once upon a time, and they have a good lawyer. And it's hard to also trust lawyers. I mean, that's another thing, right? So having a trusted lawyer within your ecosystem, or they really liked one dev that did great work with them, and they had a good experience, they can refer them to me. And so it's like an internal network of resources that can get passed around regardless of the industry that you're working in, right? So one of my friends, she's in this co-working space, she's in sports tech, and it's like completely different than ed tech, but she's been so helpful in anything that I ever needed in like the actual like startup business world, right? I think those are really helpful. And then I guess like on a like higher level, just like being able to like, I mean, learn from them, right? Like I think the biggest resource is like knowledge. And so we are learning how to write, in the beginning, right? It was like learning how to write a contract or an NDA. We don't have funds to have a lawyer write up everything, right? So we need to learn those things as we go, or even just like things to protect ourselves, right? Like IP and those things I learned a lot from other people who had startups. And I think that's a huge resource as well.
Yeah. I think on my end, on a different angle, the resources you should be looking for should also be very much for your own health and mental well-being. Because, to Aisha's point, being a co-founder and a startup founder can be a very difficult experience in a lot of different ways. And I think having a network of people is an awesome way to address that. That's the first piece. I also think on an individual level, though, you have to realize that you can't work well when you're sick. You can't really perform at your best if you're always like, melting down inside. And so finding the thing that works for you, whether that's meditation, whether that's yoga, whether that's taking nice walks outside, having a trusted friend you can talk to, finding ways that you can support your own health is one of the best things you can do for your business.
I love both of those messages. I think the network piece is so important, connecting with people who are kind of on the same journey as you, right? They're kind of facing similar things. Maybe they've already, solved something, and they can help you say, hey, this really helped me to solve X. And that's one step saved for you, right? Instead of having to figure it out yourself. And then the, personal piece, right? You can only show up as your best self if you're feeling like your best self, right? So taking those times to work out or take a break, go talk to someone like Mona mentioned. All of those things are so important. And I think sometimes we don't talk about those things as much when we're thinking about building a company. So I think it's great to highlight those, that you should also be doing some of these things for yourself so that you can show up as your best self. Definitely. So as you're looking ahead for ASL Aspire, right, as in the next few months, couple of years, what are some things you're focused on that you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, well, we just recently launched our teacher dashboard system, which has been a really long time in the making. So I am super looking forward to being able to bring that to teachers, classrooms, and see how that goes. I love being able to actually go and see our students and work with them. They're always a delight. So that's one of my big hopes for this year, is that I get to do a lot of that and get to meet all kinds of new, wonderful, kids who are going to be potentially using our product. And we're also hoping to, expand this year to organizations beyond the classroom. Learning happens in so many different spaces. And while we're trying to provide a tool primarily for educators and their students, those students are going out into the world, and there still isn't language access for them at places like museums or zoos. So this year, we're also starting to kind of put our feelers out in that direction and see if we can't make American Sign Language a little bit more prominent in those spaces.
Yeah, I think just like adding on to what Mona said, very much so just product market fit and seeing if what we built actually, I mean, we've tested it in, environments where we have research and we found outcomes, but seeing it in the real world is a little different, I will say. So seeing how people, I think the biggest thing for me is seeing how people adopt new technology within the classrooms. That's always really, really interesting because every classroom is so, so different. Like we go into schools and we get to see like how they interact. Like, do they have set time for, iPads or Chromebooks, or is it like an entire day thing? I mean, all those things like are so important, and so that's something that we're tracking, like as Mona said, with that new dashboard to see like the usage and how they're using it. We also hope to like have some pilots in the next upcoming year to see like long term how they're using it throughout the entire school year. So it's not just we're like looking on the back end and kind of making inferences, but actually seeing it live in the classrooms. And yeah, like Mona said as well, like expanding that mission out to more than just schools. It's been a really interesting and insightful because this is the first time that we're working with the entire community. So in the past, like when we're working with schools, it's like, students, deaf students and their parents, which are usually hearing parents, and then the teachers. So it's very like isolated, and we're only like working with those three in mind. But then when you're doing it on a bigger scale, where we're selling to a zoo, for example, it's like now the entire community is involved, and so I've been learning a lot about how to do or how to lead community building and like focus groups and all of that. So that's been really interesting. We've never like planned an event in our own life, so this was super interesting to like figure out how to like get the community involved. Like clearly there's a problem at hand, but how do we get everybody around us to help us as well? Everybody's quick to say the problems, but then when we're asking for help, that's how do we leverage everybody around us to build a great solution. So that's something that we're still exploring and figuring out as we go. That's one of the new things that I'm figuring out too, is like how do we go about community building.
Yeah, I think that's become an important aspect of building a tech company, is building that community aspect. One question I had, what are some indicators you're looking for product market fit? Because I think this is something, founders have to kind of figure out what it is for their specific, company that they're building. So for you, are there certain indicators that is going to show you, okay, this is our product market fit here?
Yeah, so for us, I'd say there's two aspects of it. So the product market fit is on the actual, like within the classroom, are the teachers and students using it? So that those metrics, but also product market fit on the sales cycle end of it. Like, do school administrators and decision makers, people with buying power, find this as an essential tool? We're not selling a supplemental tool, we're selling an essential tool. So do they find it necessary and vital for their students' success and their own, internal metrics? So that's, I guess, like the market side of things. Like, is our, business model validated? We have done paid pilots, so I do think it's getting validated. But furthermore, like, is it getting validated within the actual entire, target market?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's important to talk about it because sometimes product market fit can feel a little vague for founders. So I was just very curious for your perspective. And just a few more questions, but as you're thinking of like the next steps, right? You have a few pilot customers. You're wanting to get into more of the schools and these other areas. How do you think about sales and just kind of, because we talked a little bit about this outside of this podcast, but the sales cycles can be long for certain industries, including, education. So how have you approached some of those things?
Yeah, I'd say so. Initial sales, I think there's so much like buzz about like AI sales, but I think especially for the work that we do, we're working on accessibility, right? And so I think the biggest thing that's we found success was making it very specific to the place that we're working at. So for example, if we're working at a zoo, going into the zoo with our, deaf leadership team and them pointing out which aspects are not accessible. And then taking those like initial insights as the first point of contact to that zoo and being like, our team, the deaf community has come and like done a like I guess I don't know what's the word, Mona, for it.
I'm
But
like an
like
otter.
yeah, like analyzation of like what isn't accessible. And so that's been really successful because it's really specific to the institution that we're working at, and it has tangible outcomes too, right? So it's not just like a brief like, hey, here's our mission, love to work with you. It's like this is exactly what we want to fix, and this is the team that we have with us, and would you like to solve this problem for this community? And that has been very, very successful. Honestly, I haven't found much failure with this route. And from that initial, like our work of like initially doing that, it has scaled. So, like, say we're working with one aquarium, they're like, oh, by the way, the other aquarium across the nation is like also going through something like that. They're all in their own communities. That's when the word of mouth kicks in, and we can step back a little bit because there's actually the proof of concept inside of those institutions of us being successful. And so then, the proof is in the pudding. It's working on its own. People can see it. There's also, buzz around the things that we're doing. There's pictures, there's videos, people can do their due diligence on us, and I have to do less work. So that's kind of the sales cycle approach that we're going for. And the same goes for schools, right? So we go in for a research study with the school, we spend a year there. They see success and they go tell their partnering schools or within their district. And those learning outcomes and that their grades speak for themselves in that aspect, right? Mona can probably talk a little bit more about schools if
Yeah. I think with the sales cycle, the best way to address that is to be there early, right? Like to be there way, way ahead of when those decisions are going to be made. So for us, it's about finding like how can we genuinely help these schools? We do need to make like profit, obviously, but our number one focus is making sure we're providing something of use to these schools, something that's going to genuinely improve the lives of the students that they're with. And so going in early and making sure that we are talking with these schools a year ahead of time. I mean, we are having the conversations with the administrators so far in advance that they tell us, "Oh, we'll see you in 2027. We'll see you in 2028." But because we started early with many of those districts, like that means that now this year, as the school sales cycle is opening up, we've positioned ourselves to be like ready for that. And beyond that, teachers have been just wonderful advocates for us. They face the problem of not being able to give their kids STEM access daily. They often are coming up with their own solutions. Teachers I talk with have done everything from creating their own board games for the kids to spending hours creating their own videos for the kids. These educators have such beautiful hearts, and they've been very willing to share that generosity with us and to spread the word about what we're doing. And we try as much as we can to build on that and make sure we're fulfilling our promises back to them in turn.
Amazing. The theme I'm hearing here is you have advocates, right? So you go in and you have success in certain schools and certain places, and they advocate for you with others. So hopefully that ripple effect will continue. I'm sure of it, actually. You guys are doing such amazing work. So before we wrap up, anything else that you would like to talk about that perhaps I didn't cover in any of the questions?
Yeah, I think one thing that I wanted to say as well is like, especially for people starting up, is like, so I'm part of, accelerator programs, and a lot of them are B2C and success. Like those KPIs, they give you that boost of serotonin and like you can keep going and adrenaline, like, oh my God, this is working. I have 1,000% increase in my customers and whatever, whatever. B2B is slow as a snail. And we have to find success within our own products and our own like small wins to keep us going. And Mona and I talk about this a lot, where it's like sometimes the only reason we wake up in the morning is because we see how the kids react to our product, and that's what keeps us going. And if I don't have at least one school visit or some interaction with a deaf student within the quarter, I start like losing sanity. And it is so important to keep reminding yourself that like amidst all the noise. There's so much noise, whether that's a political state of the world, whether that's your own financial situations, like just reminding yourselves like why you're doing this and who you're doing it for. That those things are like I said, like the reason we wake up every morning and why we keep doing what we're doing. And so that's like a good reminder. And every time I go, and like I just went to a conference and I saw a bunch of deaf students like come and play the games and they got so excited. I was just like, wow, I'm like revitalized. Like I'm so energized. Like I told Mona, I was like, put everything on the calendar. Like I'm ready. Like even on like operations side, like I don't have much interaction with our main customers because I sell to, hire people within the district. And so I think it's important to always have that exposure, and take the small wins as they come, because in B2B, it'll take 6 months to 2 years to have something signed on. And so you can't be relying on that for momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a different type of mindset you have to go in with, and you do have wins all the time. It's just sometimes I think we're looking at the metrics that everybody thinks we should be looking at, right? And they may not be the indicator that you are making progress. I hear this with my clients who are doing B2B, right? Where it's like, well, I've been, on this for a while, but I don't have the conversions I'm looking for. It's like, yeah, your sales cycle, like Aisha said, are 6 months to 2 years, right? If you give up in the middle of that, you're actually losing something, right? So you have to stay motivated and come back to the mission of this is why I'm doing this. Such an amazing message. Anything else from you, Mona, on anything that we may not have covered?
Yeah, no, I completely agree on keeping your focus on the mission. Whatever problem you are out there trying to solve and whatever you're working on, it always comes down to the heart of it, because there will always be paperwork for whatever job you're doing. There will always be problems that come up, challenges, all that stuff. But the thing that's going to keep you from shutting down entirely is remembering your why. And if you can define that at the beginning, then you have this powerful force that's going to keep you going through even the darkest days, even the most challenging situations. So find your team and find your why, and you have the recipe for moving forward.
Amazing messages. Thank you, guys. So my last question is, are there any resources such as books, podcasts, mentors, advisors, coaches, like things that have really helped you along the way for you? Because I think sometimes people don't know where to go. And I think if something, speaks to you here, inspires the listener, that's what we're here to do, is to create access to those resources.
Yeah, I mean, so we started in COVID, so we really had to tap into like the Slack networks. There's so many. I mean, we are in the ed tech world, so if you look for it, you'll find something. And I think through that too, we found so many people who either are doing something similar to us or adjacent to us or in special education, or we just want to pick their brain because I think they're smart and I want to see what they have to say. And so those have been really helpful. I'd say the Slack groups. And then once we got back in person, I think there's a lot of local networks. So here in Chicago, we have the EdTech Institute of Chicago, where it's just all EdTech founders. We meet up twice a month. And if not, I see them everywhere at all the networking events I go to. So it's so nice to see like familiar faces that are also working on like the future of education. And I believe in their mission as much as they believe in us. And I think that that's a great kind of just like a network of people who are in the same industry as you, and they can help you if you need anything. I would say ed tech is a nice industry. Everybody's always willing to help. So I don't know if that's like can be equivalent to other industries, but yeah, just like real. Those are real people. I think once we like got out of like COVID, now that we're like seeing these people in person, it's just so nice to see like actual real life supporters like rooting for us. So yeah, I would say that. I'm not gonna lie, I don't think I know any like books or podcasts. Mom, do you have any other?
Well, I would say one thing to always look at. I've seen this both in the St. Louis library where I'm at and back in Champaign, and pretty much everywhere I've gone is the libraries almost always have business programming. If you go and look at their events, they'll often have how to master Outlook or how to, start doing your customer discovery program. Those are really great for that. The other really good thing for customer discovery that our team has done a couple times is the I-Core program. It's an NSF-led program that happens at a lot of different universities and institutes around the country. And it guides you through all those beginning parts of what kind of questions do you ask and how do you refine them. And it's been a really valuable resource for our team in the past.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for sharing all of your insights, your journey, and also the resources that have helped you. I really appreciate the time you've taken to speak with us today. And good luck to ASL Aspire. I look forward to seeing how all of this unfolds in the next few years.
Thank you, Dara. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having us on. This was fun.
Thank you for joining us on the Little Pursuits podcast. Please follow, subscribe, and share this with one builder who needs it.